Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. JX Hooper, they, them, teaches theater history, a current PhD candidate within the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Ethical Humanist Clergy. Tough when you haven't done vocal exercises beforehand. Both as performer and clergy within the ethical culture movement and First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, their ritual-based performance is grounded in the act of homiletics, decolonial humanism, and Black intellectual thought. A whole lot of words and a long set of sentences that I really should have gone over before I just jumped into them, but I think we got through them. I want to bring on Jay now to talk more about themselves, their story, and everything. Welcome to the show, Jay Exodus Hooper. Hey, Jay.
Hey. Oh my gosh, thank you, Emily. And yes, all of that, thanks for a bit of the accolades, but like I'll tell you, anybody, the accolades are great, but the character is better. And truly, those fancy words. But yes, as y'all probably just saw, like you saw every bit of what I was, homiletics is really just a fancy word for preaching.
I like to start off, and I don't know that I always ask this question right, so I'm gonna phrase it this way: are you comfortable about talking about your identity itself? I know some people aren't.
I like to talk about my identity because I find that it is I'm an artist, so I realize that I'm constantly in creation, and so I respect that about myself, and I have always respected that about myself. Growing up, Pentecostal. So if you wonder where all that energy comes from, it comes from a lot of that, embodied energy, and very embodied experience. Very well loved, always filled with possibility and curiosity, but I was always creative. So it was nothing strange for me to engage in things that were queer or different.
Mm-hmm.
I did not come into understanding fully all of myself, and I'm still in this process, but I will say, like, to identify as a non-binary person, I had to really sit with the fact that I felt the divine feminine and I felt my mask energy, and I felt them both residing. And I was like, okay, today I feel more femme. And here it is, my partner, she, her, they and them really helped me usher, a lot of that portion of my life. And I was really realizing that, like, in many ways, she was also the femme that I saw myself in, which was very interesting. I saw a reflection of the femme that I liked to be when I looked into her. And then there was a part of me that also had to appreciate the mass and the energy of, my mass energy. And I was really sitting with this for quite some time. I've been sitting with this all throughout seminary. Try to do this while you're doing seminary. Honey, woo! You want to mess with your faith? I was like, oh, no. And here it is. I was raised Pentecostal, so I had no texture. Like, it is what it is. It is a very black and white situation. You can't, it's very, this is male, this is female, this is what it is. And I was like, why do I feel comfortable in both spaces? Why do I feel comfortable holding this energy? Why do I feel comfortable holding, all of this? And I'll never forget, I went out to a restaurant and I had on a piece with no strap, with straps. So it was like a tank. It was like a t-shirt. It was a t-shirt. It was long, and then I had a denim vest jacket that also had no sleeves. The restaurant said I could not come in because I was not dressed appropriately as a man. was so confused. And I was so like, and I was thinking to myself, like, what is going on? Hold on. I'm not dressed appropriate. Men are not supposed to wear tank tops. But I didn't have on a tank top. And then I was like, I don't have one. So then, shoe game, honey, I had on heels. So there was no way for them to be. I was like, what are you saying? I don't know what you're saying to me. I had a moment where I literally had blocked out the world and all of its structure. And I was like, wow, why am I feeling like this? Why does it feel like every bit of my personhood was being attacked? Every bit of my aspect of my humanity was being attacked. And I moved through the world in a very creative lens, dealing from the creative lens as a cosmos, constantly wanting to create new stories. I wasn't dealing from a space within my queerness and my creativity from a place of chaos. There's a difference. Because when I had to deal with the chaos of my reality, that I could not walk into the world, that's when good trouble had to happen. Because it did. It really did. Because I had to sit with the reality. I said, and I looked at, my boyfriend, I said, I want to go into this restaurant. I don't understand. I said, over here, Becky got on a tank top and got on sneakers, and she don't look half as cute as I do. She didn't. And I knew it. And I just was like, I just know. And you can't tell me I can't look over here and see, Brad and be like, Brad, I'm dressed better than you. You barely got on it. You just got on a regular polo shirt and some khakis. What you doing? You basic. Right? You can tell I get it like a real fashionista in the head. So I was like, this is not probably the way that people want to think of me. But I was like, oh no, you're going to get red.
Well, yeah, I love that you're looking at the situation through your filter, and you're seeing you're seeing things in different levels than what they're viewing it as, and different categories entirely. And you're like, but I'm in a higher category than all these people, these schlubs that are out here looking.
Yes, I was like, why? Why are we doing this? And so they called the manager. The manager comes out, tells me no. And so at this point, they expect for me to get rowdy. I know why they expect me to get rowdy, because where am I? I'm in Baltimore. Number two, I'm a person of color. I just so happen to be a queer person of color. So here in Baltimore, queer people of color, we have a bad rep. But I'm fine to be whatever I need to be. So I literally looked and I said, you know what? I still want to go into this restaurant, but I'm not going to push it. So I walked around. Me and my boyfriend are talking. What happens is he can see that it's bothering me. And he's white. So he can move in the world very differently than I can. And he can move through the world in a very different way because of his age and because of his stature and because of just the look already. So I said, why don't you use your privilege? I went for it. I went for it, honey. I did. I went for it. Just use your privilege. Just see what happens. Let me see if the manager comes out for you. Let me see if you have security at your door. Come on, because I don't know if anybody else has been through this, but we had security and a manager telling me no. He walks up, guess what? Not a manager, not security, none of which. And when I walked behind him, they were confused. We didn't already broke the barriers because at this point, they didn't realize that I was with him. But the manager doesn't want me in the store. Doesn't want me sitting near the front. Ask me where we go. Asking the waiter, where are you sitting then? Because now I've become a problem. This let me know on so many levels why it is so problematic to bring all of this into the equation, to be not only dealing with intersections, but matrix of domination, in the words of Dolores Williams. Being black or being a person of color while being queer, while also living in not only a queer body, but also a non-binary body, and having to operate from a space in which people have already made assumptions about you. If you have ever seen yourself constantly strike out, hell, I mean, it was just like all clear to me that I needed to own every bit of what was trying to be that domination and say, I accept this, but I affirm who I am. I will accept this, but I will always affirm who I am. And so that is where all of that self-love comes from, because I had dealt with the queer creative chaos in a way to say I'm going to transform it for my cosmos, because I needed a new story. And so my new story came out, as J Exodus, as as being, as moving further into understanding myself as a non-binary person, as understanding that I was also disrupting the status quo, that I'm polyamorous, that I'm a person who can move in the world. I own proudly my dialogue as someone who has been a survivor of HIV for 13 years. I'm like, no one can just hold those things without feeling some kind of shame based off of our society, based off of our circles, sometimes even within our own community, because we do so much shunning. We do so much exempting. We have so many barricades instead of having simply boundaries. And boundaries are different than barricades. But I think if we really work on ourselves, we can get rid of that. So that's how I've come to who you see today. You might see somebody tomorrow different, and that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I love evolving. And that's the thing about our sexuality. That's the thing about our gender identities. They are ever evolving. And we should hold them and cherish them for when they are brought before us, for us to gaze upon them and love them in all of their ultimate radical realities that they offer us in that moment. Because we become not just surreal, but we become the thing that everyone has dared to imagine. I dare us in our community to love ourselves that way. That is something that we should dare to love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to it, the gatekeeping that happens in the community sometimes, seeing bisexuals derided by both sides, both the queer community and the straight community, seeing non-binary folks looked down upon by transgender folks, binary transgender folks. It blows my mind. It doesn't make any sense. Like people tried to go with the black and white and say that there's an either or. There's no reverence for the journey and the exploration of your identity and the fluidity of it. It's got to be, you have to have a destination. You have to work towards that. And if you take steps back, you're detransitioning. I just absolutely hate that term and that concept. Yeah, right. That's the face I make. It just negates the validity of an exploration. And
it does. Sorry, I'm having them all. I'm thinking about that like, oh, honey. Oh, no.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we're here to break that up and show that everybody in the under the transgender umbrella is welcome here, is equal, and we can row in the same direction. We can get this moving and do good things. So
you gonna have my arm muscles. I can see this gonna be a workout on this network. We about to do some. Whew, I look. I got little arms too, so this jacket might not fit after I'm done.
So you sort of alluded to it, and I wanted to ask my favorite question to ask trans folks is, how did you choose your name? Is J Exodus a chosen name, something you cultivated, or was that given to you?
Oh my gosh. Yay. Somebody actually asked the question that matters. So that is my chosen name. J is my chosen name with the accent E. Now, if you did hear anyone so if you wouldn't know the difference a lot of times if you were just around like my folk at from my community, from like home who knew me, they still say J because that would be Jay. But there is a Jay, and then there is J, which has this little soft and this kind of flair, and that believe it or not was developed out of seminary. Mind you, I was already kind of annoyed every time because people would introduce themselves like, "Oh, my name Jay," and I was like, "Okay." I knew that their nickname was Jay, but it was like standing for Jason or Jonathan, and so like you always had that. Like I am literally just Jay. My father's middle name is Jay. I am just Jay. So when people would ask me, well, what is your name? I'd say Jay. They said, does that stand for anything? I want your government. I was like, I'm giving you my government. You don't even believe that it's my government. So then that even made it even more problem. I was like, gosh. So here it is. I was sitting in seminary and we were learning in about, I was doing my Hebrew Bible class. So pardon me for anyone who has any type of religious trauma. I do not mean this in any harm or anything, but in seminary, we do have to take our Bible courses. And one particular parts of our courses that we do have to study the Hebrew Bible. I want to be very specific in saying that instead of saying Old Testament, and respectfully so for cultural reference. And the Hebrew Bible was split up into various what they call documents, and two of the documents really set out for me, which was called the Uwittic document, which deals with the if you will, the direct relationship of like the personal relationship with Yahweh, this Yahweh framework, a direct relationship. So you can imagine a Uwittic document deals with everything that is directly personal to what we understand as personal God. So I was like, this other document was an E document. The E document is the Elohist document, where we understand the concept of God as doing something. God the Almighty, right? God and so it's a distancing, but it's built off of, quote, God's characteristics, not necessarily a doing, but a characteristic. So here you got the personal name and you got the characteristics. And I was like, I really like this because I thought about myself. Now, I'm a humanist, to be honest with you. All that training, and here I am, a humanist, right? Someone who works in the non-theistic context. But I really, really like this idea of people being able to enter a space with me that was personal, that was deeply personal, where they could see themselves as a reflection of me. And if they were scared of the reflection that they saw, it was also because they saw the fears that I had also dealt with. They saw all of those things. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to use the Uwittic and I'm going to use the Elohist. I wanted people to see my character. So here it is. I want this down-to-earth experience. And that's how I turned these documents into an actual name, where J-E. And then the accent really is taken from the Hebrew writings that have kind of this also kind of marking that deals with the word shalah, which is really an action word for some kind of praise. It's kind of like a excitement. It happens. It's just like, oh, So when you experience J, you're going to experience someone who's down to earth with a lot of excitement. And so that's the details of the name. It is really theologically, you know, theorized, but it is packaged in these very kind of essential ways because I had to understand myself, never wanting to lose myself. I never wanted to lose myself. I didn't want anybody else to own my narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what those documents showed me, that there were too many people owning those narratives. And I was giving people the ability to own narratives that actually I needed to be in control of, that spoke to my aliveness, which is the accent.
Mm-hmm.
So there you are.
Well, and I love that you're still able to honor the name that your parents gave you and your father's name, but make it your own, make it represent you. And I think that's beautiful. And
my dad, really, I will say this, you know, I lost my father last not this past December, but the following December. And my dad was such a beautiful soul who embraced not only the person that I was, but he also embraced the fact that he embraced the fact that I wanted my name changed. He embraced that as like, and he didn't feel like he lost, you know, a child or a son. He always wanted to see me in my development, in my growth. And I always appreciate that about my father. And it's something that I've really, you know, just taken my time to sit with, because he as an ancestor is constantly with me as this, you know, as the person I am. I mean, honestly, these clothes that I have on right now, honestly, my father will be wearing every last bit of them. And, you know, we wouldn't think any more of it today, you know, with him, because he was just a fashionable person too. So fashion is in the bloodline.
That's where you get it. I was like, oh, I have none of that. How do you get that? It's like, okay, you came by it. You came by it honestly.
Yeah, no, that is my mother and my father, both fashion. My mother used to work at Bergdorf Goodman in New York. My father was all like, you know, Fred Astaire, old school, classic. They love, like, I don't know anything but fashion.
I'm I've always been a very discount shopper, and you know, part of that comes from the shame and the shame of being trans, and not having that love for myself, and feeling like I deserved, you know, the nice things. I eventually kind of got there, and was buying myself some nice dresses and fancier stuff, but it did take a long time, and so the thrift shops and discount stores were absolutely where I started.
I still struggle with that too. I struggle with, as someone who likes to buy heels and stuff, I struggle with where I go to get them, because I'm nervous about how someone may see me, like, live in the, you know, like, if I just want to wear a heel. I just love a heel. If it's nice, if it's a pump, I love a good pump. And it's like, yes, but it is very difficult, because I will say I have moments of, like, where I get nervous of, you know, and like, hopefully I can walk out of the store without nobody trying to jump me.
Pumped. That was one of the moments when I realized I was in trouble. I was trying to keep a marriage together, and I was trying to closet the cross-dressing, and I'm like, I'm never going to get into makeup. I'm never going to get into shoes. It's just the clothes and whatever. And I saw a pair of pumps in rose gold, and I just, like, something happened inside me, in my heart, and I was just like, this is trouble. This is a bad thing for what I'm trying to hold together here. This is a very bad thing, because I can't let these go.
Right? It's like, no, I'm going to choose. I really do. And I mean, I love, yeah, we might have to do a show where I just take y'all through my closet. Because I really enjoy my closet. I love the fact that actually me and my life partner, she and I can wear the same size shoe, and wear the same size heel. So it's really, really nice. And so, you know, like, I'm like, yes, like, Black women every day, all day, right? Like, give me queer Black woman who is like, you know, we can embrace each other in our mystery. And I love that. It's a beautiful thing. It's a really, really beautiful thing. But it's very challenging, because I also try to think about both of our safeties as we navigate the world, because, you know, courageously. It's just hard for us to both show up. So I hope that, that we can, at some point, ain't nobody really worried, or thinking about it. But, we just, at where we are today, it is something, because it's not only about expression. Somebody was like, well, you don't have, it's an embodiment. It's a real embodiment. And the embodiment is an act of justice. The embodiment to dress, to put on the makeup, to put on your shoes, to own your identity is not just an expression. It is an embodiment of justice. You owe it to yourself to declare yourself as justice, as holy before anything, because it is a public declaration of your freedom to yourself. We have forgotten that.
Yeah. From my very limited experience with spirituality and religion, I seem to remember echoes from what you're saying of the divine in all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's very much lost in society these days, where the divine is the divine, and we're under that, and need to follow these rules to be able to reach divinity at some point. And I think that it's important to remember the divinity in ourselves, and embody that.
Yes. Y'all make note of that. Write that on a piece of paper. Put that in your purse. Put that in your wallet. Open it up like it's a fortune cookie later and read it. Know that for yourself, honey. The divine is in yourself.
In my first question about your identity, I think you answered a lot of the things that we dive into early on in the questions here. When did you first realize you were non-binary? You sort of covered that. Maybe you got a little bit more specifics to that of when you realized that was the term for you, that was the identity that you embodied.
It's so weird because I feel odd because I'm like a millennial, right? So we're supposed to I like how millennials are just deeply, deeply lumped together, but I'm like a veteran millennial. I'm the Nintendo cat. I'm almost close to the Atari because I'm 84, 1984, right? So I was an Apple kid. So I wasn't reading anything. I came out, like I said, a church home, and there were just aspects at that time that too about there was a black respectability politic. I don't know if people are familiar with that kind of term, but there was a way that black people had to be seen in order to be respected by white folk. And so there was things that I was particularly being trained in to survive, to live, to be, very well versed. I mean, I knew classical music. It wasn't like I listened to it, but I knew it. We went to galleries and we did things like that. So, I was very cultured. We did not have, there was no language. To be very transparent, I'm the first in my family to go to college. I'm the first in my family to have a doctoral degree. All of these things are very new for my family. Where, clearly everybody's like, oh, well, you're doing amazing things, but they don't know necessarily what that meant for me in trying to navigate those spaces. The more I got involved. So I think when it comes down to it, when I think about, the lump sum of the millennial, as I started off with, is this thing of sitting with the complexity of how did I want to be seen in the world? Was really my question a lot of times, because I liked, was fashion rooted in the fact that I was queer, or was it rooted in the fact that I was creative? Was me just being a person who I was a dancer. Did that have anything to do with my sexuality, or was that just my creativity? All of this was always constantly in conversation for me.
Yeah.
But now if I looked at my expressions, if I looked at what I was embodying, if I looked at, my posture, my demeanor, the way that I enjoyed myself, I was falling in love with myself in ways that I knew something was different. I could say that. If I had no language at all, I knew that the way that I was falling in love with myself and the person I was becoming was different. And it was not just, oh, I'm a sexy man, or or it wasn't this moment of where like, oh, I'm all, I'm all woman, or I'm all like, it wasn't there. It was so different. And I was just like, I was like, I like how I liked my shape. I began to fall in love with my body. Where like, I wasn't homegrown. I didn't, like when we talk about like the problems with, when people like want to sit back and they're like, oh, well, you're too small to be a man. You're too big to be this. Like all of those play into factors on how people see themselves in the world. I knew that. Like that wasn't my problem. That wasn't my problem. I got to a place at some point that it just I needed language, and I needed texture and ethics, not definitions. I needed an ethic, which is very hard for queer folk because we have definitions, but we don't have ethics, and we don't leave enough room in the definition to find ourselves in ethics. Whereas like, how do we behave as these folk, as these individuals who are growing into ourselves? And, as someone, I was like, okay, was I bisexual? No, I later came to the conclusion because I had language that I was pansexual, because it didn't matter to me. I didn't have to be with a man or a woman. I could be with someone who was trans or third gender. I had dated people who identified as vampires. I had dated people who had identified as elves. That I was like, who are you, and how can I love you? How can I have an experience with you? All of that really took a huge turn in my life out of sitting in all of that curiosity, all of that mystery. All of that started to align by 2012. That is not too long ago, honey. But I've always been this individual. All I have now is language that allows for me to solidify it. And I've sat with having a posture and an ethic that allows for me to hold a space that others can also maybe hopefully be like, oh, you okay, like that's why I can be in the same, like I'm like, yes, like we connect, you're okay, you're not strange, you're not different, you're not weird, you're not, like later for the gatekeeping, later for like demonizing all this other stuff, like honey, like if you like them, you like them, if you like them, I love them, let's go, like that's how we roll. I think that's very, very tough when it comes down to pronouns. I know that, I like to be very, very, I like to be clear, but because I come from a pastoral ethic, I know people have a hard time, and I have a different kind of patience than some who probably need that. But am I going to advocate for us to get it together? I'm definitely going to advocate for it, but I'm not gonna, I'm definitely not going to take your head off because it's not happening right away. And I think those are tough moments for where I sit as a non-binary person, and holding that tension. But I think that's also the beauty of being non-binary. There's such a tension that is held, and I don't think a lot of non-conforming folk and non-binary folk talk about that tension, but it allows for us to be intersectional and try to meet the needs of of others' humanities with various needs of compassion by being open to our own possibilities when we meet others in love, and while also other people might not understand how to love us, or how we might name our genitalia, or how we experience our own body, and like the politics of our bodies when we are trying to move in the world, like I dealt with at the restaurant. All of that is a tension that I have to say has I have undergirded with my lens. And I can't say this for everybody, but I have undergirded with my lens through the lens of curiosity, through the lens of creativity.
Well, there's so much to cover in what you just said in that whole segment there. Another thing that I hadn't kind of realized, um, the need for you to act in your life, to be safe. You needed to put on a persona and to learn things to be safe as a person of color in this
Yes.
country. And I just love that sort of the intersectionality between that and being trans, and hopefully I hopefully like exploring that and kind of coming out of that has helped you in your journey to find yourself in your new identity.
I mean, definitely. I mean, and that's why I always I really appreciated, um, you know, my transcestors of color. When it comes down to trans people of color, just the level of domination that is involved regarding race, economics, and status of education, it is not easily available for that, for those who have to meet those demands. And I am watching a lot of that. There are many. I appreciate what I see a lot of my white siblings do by stretching themselves out and being able to push into these spaces. But we got to also bring along a lot of our siblings of color and figure out how do we deal with also these other dominations that the structural system is trying to put up, because we over time we can't integrate. We all and if we can't integrate and others can, we end up going through spaces of erasure, and it's tough, and it's a real tough call. I'm glad that we're actually having this conversation, because this is how we do this work, because it is moments where it's like it is a yes, it's a great deal to be on this network with you, but it's also a great thing to see that you're saying, I want to align my values with you, right? And I want to align my values with you so I can see you and walk alongside you. In addition to, right, me saying thank you, right, and allow for me to be authentically myself and walk alongside you.
Mhm.
Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, who was the mentor of Dr. Martin Luther King, says it best. I want to be me without making it difficult for you to be you. I want to be me without making it difficult for you to be you. We've got to figure out a way to walk alongside each other if we're going to really do this work.
Yeah, and that goes back to the gatekeeping and the division that is so prevalent, and there seems to be no way to be yourself without it somehow affecting or stepping on somebody else right now. Everybody's
Honey, we got to stop playing. We got to stop playing this struggle Olympics. Ain't no need to have. Look, we playing too many struggle Olympics. Everybody got to struggle. Okay, we, I'm not trying to be the first person always in a struggle. I want, like, but it happens. It's like, oh, my struggle's stronger than yours. Mine is worse than yours. We can acknowledge it, but like, we got to realize too, how can we walk alongside each other? But we got to be very clear about when we talk about those intersections and those denominations, and bring those together so that we can walk alongside, because we got to hold the tension. If we don't hold the tension, we're refusing to see both the chaos and the cosmos that we have to work through.
when you figured out and started to come into your true identity, how were you received? What were the biggest challenges in coming out and being seen and accepted?
Because I was so late, I would say, in my like arrival. I think that one of the things about it was, I would say it was a lot easier coming out, or better yet, coming in as a, you know, as pansexual. As it was very easy to come in as queer, and it was very easy. When I say easy, I mean I'm really not trying to like smooth this over like water. Uh, but because there was not language in my household, and there wasn't language around the people that I mean, most people were like, "Oh, I'm not surprised." You know, there were some people I wasn't surprised. You know, you've always been very unique. You know, you've always been very this way. So it was like, you know, I didn't have that. I don't. It didn't dawn on anyone until I stated that I was polyamorous, and then it became a different discussion, and then it became a different, you know, it became a different position of like who I was in the household, who I was in the family, what was my role. My, you know, my mother's sitting here. She's really excited. She's like, but you know, really just like who who was I in my family structure is what mattered. And then I was like, oh, now the iceberg is tipping because that wasn't clear. Um, all the other, you know, constructions on on my sexuality or my gender identity didn't dawn because there wasn't language. But when we talked about family structure and relationship, it was very clear. So my polyamory is what actually brought people into the deeper space of really being like, hold on, so what do you mean you don't want to identify as, quote, a husband? What do you mean you don't want to identify as, you know, as you know, as a son, or like all of these things became roadblocks for family structure, because once again, black social respectability politics, if you're going to be seen as even a black family, let's just be real, the percentages of single family homes, and you know, particularly black and Latinx communities, is very high compared to white America, right? And white family structures and cis family structures. So this, you know, to begin to rearrange the family structure in a way that speaks to polyamory and then speaks to community and creating community together, and then changing social structures where, like, you know, supporting black femmes, supporting black queer femmes in my family structure, in my poly configuration, is very essential. It's the number one thing in my household. If you can't honor black women, we really gonna have a problem. Mm-hmm. Right? You know, and it's because of that. It's really a cultivation thing. It's flipping everything on its head. And so I found that that was where the coming out became very clear, but it wasn't clear until it actually disrupted what everyone had to understand as family structure.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much that is challenging the hierarchy. You know, in something like that, then there's not the clear hierarchy and who's the head of the household. Mm-hmm. And
all of that played into it a lot. The structures of you know, who gives instruction. I mean, coming out of a religious home, the first thing that you understand is like the husband is the head. You know, that was like, really? I don't know if I want all that going on. You know, and you know, I mean, heck, when I met my life partner, you know, she looked at me and was like, God didn't tell me that I was marrying you. I was like, oh, excuse me. You know, I mean, but it was good to see someone with agency, and I was open to it. I was already okay with that. I didn't need to be like, well, God told me this and da 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 da. Like her response, I was like, I'm gonna marry you. She was like, God didn't tell me that. I was like, oh. You know, I think that those were very helpful things. You know, and I think it's been important to, you know, even see like moments where like even, my partner Brian, who, white, like the structure is different. Um, you know, um, Very much so trying to constantly work on understanding his position and how he is in the space, because he can move in the world differently as a white man, and particularly as a white gay man, right? That's a very different structure. And so being in a space with, two black femmes, a, black, non-binary person, here's a white cis gay man. It's a flip on complete structure, social structure. And what does it mean for that? What dialogues happen? What questions do arise? What possibilities? What what are things that also come from just social trauma, right? All of that is resting in the I'll say in the complex tension and beauty of my family.
Mhm.
I have to hold all of that. I have to call out moments of like whiteness, and how like to be mindful of, how privilege shows up. I have to be very mindful of how I show up when I am even thinking, when I'm thinking, oh, I want this moment of, to be respected in this way, but also not quench, right, the spirit of black queer femmes in my in our configuration. All of that is a dialogue, but I find that it has been so helpful because it is is a loving conviction to constantly be that critical, not sensitive, critical. Because if I want to do the work that I'm doing, if I'm going to be even on this network and be with others, like, I need to be mindful of how I see myself in positionality, how I see myself in possibility, and be mindful of how I hold power and how I engage with aspects of myself that maybe can pass as an act of privilege because of the person I might look like in the world. I need to be very considerate of that. That is challenging. That is a constant challenge of evolution that I am willing to face, though. And I find, and I see all of my partners engaging with a lot of that questioning as well. What is power? What is privilege? How do we change it to understand the importance of focusing on position and possibility? Because that's the way that's going to make us a people. Those are my three. Those are my technically my three P's when I talk about them. It is really getting us to a place of position and possibility, so we can be a people.
So, as you're coming out and you're finding your identity, were there people that supported you in a way that surprised you, that had your back and were?
Hmm. Oh, gosh, I mean, you know, being that me and my life partner were late bloomers. I mean, I was the first to tell her that I was like, okay, number one, I don't know if I believe in God anymore. Welcome to seminary, right? I was like, I don't know if I believe in God anymore. So that was like, oops. And I don't know if I necessarily actually believe. I was like, I was like, I think I'm gay, but but I love you. So I was like, I must be bi, because I still didn't have language.
Yeah.
And I was just, I did that, like that. And I really had to make sense, and I tried to keep making sense of things. But my life partner, Story Michelle, really just journeyed. I never knew. And a lot of times it wasn't a fact because I didn't tell her. It was honestly because I didn't always know.
Hmm.
I just didn't know. And I didn't know what was coming up. And I couldn't even pinpoint if something was arriving or, arising in me. I couldn't pinpoint what was concrete and what was abstract. Um, you know, there were no indicators of anything. It wasn't like, where some people can say like, oh, well, like, I felt more sexually aroused, with this person than I am with that wasn't happening. That wasn't happening at all. thank goodness it wasn't happening. I just enjoy being a sexual being, if I may be honest. So like, it was like, embrace it, and like, can I embrace that part of myself? Can I just embrace the fact that I'm a sexual being? And if anybody else was, like, that was even taboo, right? To embrace the fact of being a sexual being who actually delights in being pleasured and likes to pleasure, right? That, I don't think we talk enough about that as queer folk. We are very sexualized by other people's narrative, but we are never looked at as individuals who actually deserve pleasure and understanding ourselves to be able to offer pleasure as well. And so that was something that was happening for me. And I actually, in some ways, I will say, I feel like as I began to evolve, yeah, she held me all the way through, and not a moment, not a dull moment where I was like, and I felt bad. I did. I felt really, really bad because I was like, I can't communicate anything. I don't have no words. I'm still learning some stuff from seminary because I'm really interested in like queer and trans liberation theology. And I'm trying to like make sense of like putting this together, because I knew if I broke my religious cycle, and not let's say broke out of it, but like broke into it, where in a way where I could validate my experience, I could be able to do the work that I needed to do, not only for myself, but with others. And it took time. Now my because I went to a very liberal seminary, I mean, all of my friends were like, we love you, you're great. And I was like, I wish the fuck I knew what I was doing, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, oh my God, like, oh, what is this? And pardon me if that's too hard of language on the network, my fault. I use a lot of secular punctuation. But, like, I really was like, oh, like, I just didn't have it. And it was really just the lack of confidence. It was a lack of confidence to use language, to also not get stuck in definition. I was scared of definition. Mm-hmm. I was scared of definition because I was just like, these words don't hold me. I mean, even still to this day, I'm the same way. I mean, I'm like that with the only thing that probably sounds like, user-friendly language is like saying being polyamorous. But I don't like terms like metamor. When people are like, well, oh yeah, you're a metamor, you're a polycule. I'm like, what is that? I don't want that. That sounds like something I don't want, honey. That just sounds like, but I respect anybody who uses that kind of language. But I was just like, from my experience, like we have, we're like, that's our beloved. That's our love bugs. Those are, like we are able to put things in a certain way that speak to who we are. And I think it's okay also, what I really appreciated in having that support, I got support in creating our own language. That it didn't need to be defined, but that it could be redefined, that it could be co-defined in a way where people could, we're not telling my story, but actually taking the opportunity to share in my story and giving me the right to answer to the part of the story that actually held my truth. If they had to use it, it was very important to use to do that. So I think that's kind of the journey. When I think about just one person, unfortunately, I knew I couldn't go to church or anything like that. I was like, oh no, this is not gonna work, because I was like, I got too much. I was like, I'm about to figure everybody out with this information and how I read the text and how I was able to interpret it in very liberating ways. I didn't want to do all that. I wanted to just be authentic, and I didn't want to bring myself under any more scrutiny. So I didn't even bother to think about like if a church was going to reject me or not. That wasn't my question. My question was, who was I able to love, and who was able to share, and who was able to serve a table of love. Otherwise, I didn't want to waste my time.
Such a great perspective. I love that. I love all of your perspectives. It's wonderful. um, so as we're wrapping up this section, I have a couple final questions for you. Um, is there anything that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your identity or because of the various ways you identify?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's so interesting. That's a really powerful question. Um, it's funny to be in the spaces that I'm in. I mean, right? Number one, I'm clergy, right? Like if I listed it out in my head, I'm like, okay, well, number one, I'm a creative. Number two, I'm clergy. Number three, I'm a professor. And all of the spaces that I'm in, I am the first in a lot of those spaces, except for the creative component. right. Um, and the congregations that I serve, you know, I'm the first Black humanist. Like that's very different. But I'm also the first Black queer non-binary humanist. That's like, and so
Funnel down, very specific. Yeah.
like it does that because I'm like and so it's interesting because people will call me actually more for the racial component or the ethnic component versus my sexuality or my gender identity. And I've always and the questions are asked to me like what do I hold more? And I'm like, I go to bed with all of this. Like I wake up to all of this, yeah. And it's not easy to funnel down like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm, at Ohio in the theater department, like you would think that being in a creative space like that we would have that. No, I'm the Black, non-binary, queer person. And if you look me up and you look at my department, what you're first going to see is this, and you're going to be like, oh, it's, but it's a very open space that's trying to, enhance its ability to be welcome. And I'll be honest, like I said in my congregations, like I say in all of my spaces, look, thank you for allowing for me to be here and color white spaces. Right, that comes from out of and that's important. I think it's just important to list that. But I also like as a not only just being a person of color, I enjoy being a colorful person, right? And bringing all of that into this space and being like, this is what you get, and like you're going to be able to point to me. But the other thing is like, if you see me, if you're watching me even now, I am not to be a prototype. I am not to be the icon. I am not to be the staple. I am not to be a gateway. I am simply one person who wants to make a thumbprint for others to create the rest of the handprint.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are not a monolith. Not all people are the same. I am very, and so I think it's important to see that. I think it's important to realize that my narrative is going to be different. My journey is going to be different. And I think if we can hold that, even in this space, and just as well as I shared in my other spaces, I think that's the beginning of this work. I think that's the beginning of our healing as a global community. And I see it as a larger mission to think about this relationship as a macrocosm to a macrocosm,
Mm-hmm.
really making, full headway on the reality that we're trying to create.
Well, and and hearing you talk about your identity, your various identities, and how they play into your daily life, I feel kind of privileged to have you in this space and to have you joining us because I feel like it sounds like being non-binary is sort of tertiary to you. It's a part, but it's not what you bring forward.
Yeah.
And so it feels very privileged to have your energy here in this space showing up for the trans community, considering that.
Well, I'll say this, as I've been doing keep living for the past, from the past season, one of the phrases that started coming up for me a lot was I wanted people to find a home in me. There are so many things that rest in me that I'm just like, I am filled with possibility. There's no way that I shouldn't be able to look at, that somebody, should not be able to look at my experience and say, I want to find a home in you. And that allows for me to bring them in or hold them in spaces where they need that support, where they need that love, where they need that trust, where they need that moment of listening, where they need to come in and feel like they are seen. Um, that's deep. It's a very deep reality, for me. And so, like, I hope, just like you're doing, we're helping people find their way home. Um, and that's a big part of this work.
It's interesting though the way you frame that. You say that you want to be the home for people. I don't have the faith in myself and the trust in myself to feel like I could be that. I'm creating this space for that, but I don't have the faith in myself to understand that I can be that. That's interesting.
We're gonna grow in together. I can see you and I growing into some amazing things and possibilities because I see I do see you doing some things that I think in many ways you're very, very careful of your privilege. And I see that if you see the possibilities that you are working at, you'll see there's a home in you. But the possibility requires confidence and a confidence in being curious. And curious, oftentimes we don't think that we're sure. But
Yeah.
actually, there's a lot of confidence in it. And as someone who is, I can only speak for myself. I used to teach for 13 years in public school systems. And as an art teacher, all the students want to know are two things. Does this look good? And can I make this look real? Does this look good? And does this look real?
Mhm.
And if you think about it, our own human experience as adults, those are the questions that we still ask. Does this look good? And is this possible? Is this real? Right?
Mhm.
Is this real? There's something about this experience, even now, for you and I together, even in this space, with my show, with the network, with how you are, with how I am, we're not engaging power. At this point, we're not even engaging privilege. We're leaning into possibility that really confronts those two questions and saying, what do you think about it? And if you see what I saw today, with people tuning in, what I saw today with hearts and sunshines and rainbows, what I saw today with hashtags and love languages going across the screen. I've been doing this for some time, but it's great when you can share your possibility with me, and I can share my possibility with you, and we enter into a space of holy curiosity where we are confident in our ability to find possibility in each other. And that dismantles what we think is a right. That brings us closer to creating new spaces for us to find ways for us to connect impossibility to create new probability. That's where the shift happens. And you are doing that. But it does take us, I will say, I had to learn, it takes us to realize when we can declare it. But I see a lot of it, and it's happening, and it's happening, and it's happening. It's happening because of people like Justice. It's happening because of your team, your mod team. It is happening because of not only an audience you created, but a community, a global community. It is happening because we decided to be fearless, even while being fearful. Honor that. Let us honor that together. Let us honor that as a family. Let us honor that as a virtual community. Let us honor that wherever we are, that we are fearless while also being fearful.
Yeah, and it's what we do with that fear that defines us.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes the legacy. So, what is your favorite thing that you've learned on your journey?
I have, you know, uh, there's so much. Just, I'm like, I love, I, I, I'm just grateful that I had to come to the reality that I could wake up scared to myself, scared of my truth. And I was so scared of my own truth. I'll tell you this, how much I was scared of. I was so scared of my truth of waking up every morning. I did not want to lose sight of that fear. Most people, when they're like scared, they adjust themselves. I literally knew, I would think, oh, I can't wear that today. I can't do this today. I can't, I need to make sure I look like this because I got to go here. And when I started doing that, I realized I was operating from a place of fear and scarcity. I was coming from a place of fear and scarcity. And I said, actually, you take that scare that you have and you embody it to a place where you realize you actually need to transform it. And I would actually, instead of adjusting myself because of my fear, I would step more into it because I needed to defeat my fear with my bravery to be myself. It is a big deal, honey, to wake up to yourself and actually have that much level where you're like, I am scared of myself and what might come out. I'm scared of myself and to think of what may happen. I am scared of myself to realize I actually might be, I might want to put this on. I might be attracted to this person, or I might want, and after a while, I might want to create this. I might establish it. And you get to a place where you're like, actually invite the scare for a minute and balance it out. And if you can succeed over the scare with bravery, it's almost like a scale. You can balance it out, but you don't want it to equal out too much, because the truth of the matter, you want this to be you want your bravery to be more than what your scare was. And that's what I had to realize along my journey. It helped me. It really helped me. And so when I do walk in the world, I walk here. And it's like, oh, wow. And then I forget that scare. I forget why I woke up with all the anxiety. I forget why I was dealing with social depression. I forget why I cared in the first place. I'm like, yes, like I'm queer as in fuck you. Oops, there it is. And people be like, oh, that's what that, like, yeah, that's why I really don't care. And people be like, okay, but I got there.
Yeah.
And that has been the journey. And and to take back my narrative in all of it and be like, I actually don't owe you this scare. I'm not going to pay you with my scare. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. This is not the fall. This is not the fall. What is it? The fall fair. I don't have to go through no creepy little haunted house and pay for somebody to scare me anymore. Nope. I'm sorry. My integrity and my character is too well intact and too well invested in for me to give you all that attention. Not today. Not today, Satan. Not today. Okay.
Well, I love the idea of taking the power out of that fear, and you know, we still have we're governed by the lizard brain, and our reaction is fight or flight. There's several other F's listed in that, but I'm going with the high level just for simplicity's sake. But so all of these fears come up in things that we do in our day-to-day lives, and I feel like what you're saying is, you know, as you are embracing that fear and really examining it, you start to realize what fears are real and what aren't, what you can overcome and what you can't, and or what situations really should cause fear, and where you are literally, you know, truly in danger, and yeah, it helps you balance things out and look at everything different, and then things that you're afraid of, then you're just curious. You're like, okay, I'm fearful of this. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. No, it's all about. Yeah, what I hear off of that too is like there is a need to. I've been saying since we've been talking also about like, you know, evolution, but I think there's another thing that's coming to me now, is the need to also elevate. You know, like, and I'm gonna need to sit with that some more. But I'm just feeling in my chest area this need to like elevate my heart, elevate my mind, like, and rise above. You know, there was I'm beginning to think about there was a video some time ago, 2 years ago, that came out where uh, a hotel um, clerk was helping a woman. The woman got very indignant, and the clerk began to lift up his hands and said, "It's above me. It's above me." It was above him. And so I think there's a part of a lot of our experience that sometimes we got to get to that place where it's above me. You know, this is not my pay grade, honey. Yeah. This is not in my pay grade, honey. It's above me. You know, I ain't got nothing else to add to you other than it's above me. And maybe that is the elevation too. Well, you know, and I'm willing to sit, you know, I'm you know, now you didn't spark the scholar in me where I'm like, let me go find some things on elevation and how that happens and how we do that, because we need to get to a place where it's important to understand our position, but also understand our preposition and how we can overcome our situation. If something is above me, then that means I can go under you. But one way or another, I'm a maneuver around you. I don't care if I got to do the electric slide, honey, and get around you. I'm going to do it. Okay. You know, I don't care what it takes. If we need to do a hold down and I need to go ahead and get in my line dancing and put on my cowboy boots, we can go, baby. Okay. Because one way or another, I'm going to get around this because look, we as trans and gender diverse folk, we know how to maneuver if we need to. So we're going to sashay. We're going to sashay right on away from you, honey, if you want to act like you ain't got no good sense.
As we wrap this section up with a nice little bow and take a much needed break for you, definitely, I'm sure. What are the key pieces of advice, or what is the key advice you have for young or closeted trans, non-binary, gender diverse folks out there?
My babies, my babies, my babies. I'm going to give you the advice that holds dear to me because I'm going to give you something that is deeply intimate to me. I'm inviting you in a deep for meditation walk. This is for my young babies here. And if y'all and for those who still have a youthful heart, I invite you to do this meditation with me. You have decided to walk on a sidewalk, and you have decided to walk down this road on this sidewalk, and you come to a door, and there's a house, and you knock on the door of that house. You take a deep breath, because you don't know what's on the other side of the door waiting for you. Take a knock. Maybe it's a hard knock. Maybe it's a soft knock, because you're unsure. But knock, nonetheless. I want you to just knock. And I want you to take the moment to take that deep breath that is causing you reluctancy, causing you hesitation, causing you fear, maybe causing you anxiety. And I want you to get prepared because I'm going to open the door. I'm going to meet you at the door. I'm going to smile at you. And I'm going to tell you to fall in love with the learning of yourself. Fall in love with the learning of yourself. Fall in love with what you call me, myself, and I. Fall in love with the learning of your worth. Fall in love with the things that you have yet to discover. Fall in love with all the things that you have tried and tried again and never throwing in the towel. Fall in love. At any time you want to come knocking on this door, anytime you want to walk down that sidewalk, know that down the road there is a house and a home for you to fall in love with the learning of yourself.